You're watching Inside the Right. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, longtime Republican operative Tim Miller. So, Tim, I know that we've spoken about instances where Donald Trump has underperformed in primaries, even though he's pulled out the win in the past. He straight up lost Vermont. This was the second primary race that he's lost besides Washington, D.C. I know that Washington, D.C. wasn't huge news in that there was a small turnout, and it's a pretty heavy liberal bastion there. But lost Vermont. How big of a blinking red light is this result for him?
No, don't run past that Washington, D.C. loss. I mean, if only we had those smoke-filled rooms, then we could really be
That's
in
right.
business because that
Yeah.
they would have gone against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Look, losing Vermont isn't good for him. At this point, especially given it's like not even really a campaign that's happening. I think that's an important context for all of this. Nikki Haley wasn't running ads in any of these states. Her campaign was not she didn't have the pedal to the metal. Let's just say that. Like the amount of events she's having and the amount of recruitment of grassroots and all this. Like a lot of this was just people going out to vote because they wanted to send a signal that they like Donald Trump or they hate Donald Trump, right? And so the fact that enough people in Vermont went out to say I don't like Donald Trump to vote against him in a Republican primary. Now this isn't a swing state, but I don't think that's a good sign for him. I wish the best case scenario would be for Nikki Haley to have scrounged out 5 victories because that would have allowed her to have her name put into nomination in the convention. It doesn't really seem like that's going to happen. It's hard to see where on the map she finds 3 more victories after those two. So, I think in that sense, maybe a little bit disappointing for her the performance in Virginia, for example, or in Minnesota where Marco Rubio won last time. Those were maybe some of the other ones we were looking at tonight. But again, Donald Trump loses a race against somebody that isn't even campaigning. You can contrast that to what's happening with Biden. There's a lot of agita over, uncommitted, et cetera. Well, Biden hasn't come close to losing anywhere.
Right.
So I definitely think it's noteworthy.
Well, I want to point everybody's attention to some exit polls that came out of these states. So there were a number of voters who said that they wouldn't vote for Donald Trump, and these are Republican primary voters. North Carolina, there were 35%, Virginia 36%, California 33%, and this has been a consistent number among his other primary results as well. So what did you take out of those numbers?
Yeah, and the North Carolina one is most interesting, and I know we're gonna talk about the gubernatorial candidate there too. But if you just look at this, because it's a stretch swing state, it's not a key swing state, but it's the one of the ones that had exit polls that is going to be the most competitive in the fall. Nikki Haley gets almost a quarter of the vote there, a little short of 25%. But then of those voters, 62% say they're not going to vote for Trump or are not interested in voting for Trump. So, just doing some quick math there, we're looking at about 12% of the Nikki Haley vote, 12% of the GOP primary electorate that says that they go against Trump. That's a jump for 2020. Now, some of those people might be some independents or people that crossed over to vote for Nikki Haley. So, maybe it's a little bit lower than that. But if you go back to 2020, Trump lost, depending on kind of whose data you trust, between 6 and 8% of Republican voters. It seems like that there is certainly an opportunity for that number to grow just using North Carolina as a base example, and maybe it could be more in states that are even more swingy. And so I think that is the one number that really jumped out at me in the exit polls.
Well, help me square this because we're seeing these pretty massive defections even among Republican primary base voters, and yet we have polls at the same time that show Donald Trump in the lead by 2, 3, 4 points. So if he has these massive defections, even bigger defections than he had in 2020, that he's contending with among his own base voters, the people who should be gimmies, which is a far cry from what he needs among independents and suburban voters and on, then how do you reconcile these two things?
Yeah, well, so if you just look at the New York Times poll that everybody's freaked out about for the one example, I mean, the Trump number is 48, right? Which is like the margin of error. I mean, and he's been getting 47 in every election forever, right? Like that's just been his number, 46, 47. So maybe that's a hair high. There's a margin of error. So really the big change is in the Biden number, right? Biden is at 43 in that poll. If you look into the crosstabs, the interesting number there is that about 20% of people that said that they voted for Biden in 2020 are saying that they're not voting for him this time. And so, okay, I think that means that is the question. All right. So are those voters moderates that Trump is winning over? I don't know, maybe. I mean, you're talking about somebody that's going to vote for Trump that voted for Biden in 2020 saw January 6th and now is going back to Trump. I know there'll be some of those people, but I think that a lot of those people are actually Biden supporters who are registering their unhappiness with either age, Gaza, inflation, immigration, whatever it is. They're people that are Biden voters that are unhappy about something. And right now they're telling pollsters, I'm not voting for Joe Biden because I'm upset about whatever this thing is that they're upset about. Then the question is, can the Biden team bring those folks back? And I think that is what you're seeing in these polls. And Trump, frankly, I think that, if you look at these, at the numbers from the primary polls where he's not kind of meeting his number, he's fallen short of his number in a few places. I think that there might certainly be the potential for a trend there for him to, fall a little bit short and go back into that 46, 47 range where he's like pretty much been for 9 years.
Well, between those two, between the Trump voters who are defecting, registering their unhappiness with him, these are the previous Trump voters who are now saying that they don't want any part of him, and the Biden voters who are saying that they're unhappy because of Gaza, because of his age, because of whatever it is. Which camp would you rather be in right now? Whose like worries are more are more potent here between the two sides?
Yeah, boy. I mean, I would rather be in a camp where Donald Trump's getting his ass kicked, if I'm being really honest. Because I don't want Donald Trump to come back, Brian. I don't know if people have noticed that by now. I really don't like Donald Trump at all. I'd slightly rather be Biden because, and I think it's just based on, we've seen this, 18, 20, 22. The anti-Trump coalition has, at the end of the day, come out. Like, they've come out to vote against him. We saw it in the midterms of 22 in Arizona and other places. I was really worried about Arizona. I did a lot of media there for the circus and for the bulwark. I went to Arizona, went to a lot of campaign events, and I was nervous about that because there was a lot of energy behind Kerry Lake, behind Blake Masters. There wasn't as much energy behind the Democratic side. And I see a lot of parallels to that now, right? Where the Trump events are big and like it's maybe a smaller base, but the ones that are there are still super excited and freaky. And maybe a little less, there's some consternation among people in the Biden coalition. But like, at the end of the day, there's this that all Biden has to do is just reconstitute this anti-Trump coalition that's already come out 3 straight times against him, and so that's why I would slightly rather be in the Biden position. Though, boy, I wish we were peeling off even more of the Trump people than we are.
Yeah, but by the way, this is a Biden coalition that came out for him when the Republicans, in 2018, 2020, before all of the madness that we're continuing to see right now. I mean, the normalization of the Hitler-esque rhetoric. I mean, January 6th, to your earlier point. I mean, it hasn't gotten any less extreme. The abortion restrictions, efforts to ban interstate travel, IVF. I mean, it's only gotten worse, and so it would be hard for me to imagine these people seeing what happened. Given how the turnout was for Biden and the Democrats in 2018, 2020, 22, and 23, that given what we've seen even in just the last few months, that it wouldn't get even worse for like normal people out there who, by the way, to your exact point, aren't going to be showing up in like doing boat parades, right? Like wearing pictures.
There are no Biden boat parades.
No Biden boat parades. Like wearing shirts with Biden's face. Like there might not be the energy, the cultish energy that Trump gets, but like at the end of the day, these people, we don't need that. We're not looking for that. We don't need the boat parades. It's not what wins elections. It's votes of people that recognize what the country is contending with right now and get out of their house and hand in their ballots on November 5th. To your earlier point though as well, you'd mentioned the Bulwark. For everybody watching right now, if you want to support Tim and the work that he does, please make sure to subscribe to the Bulwark. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It's a great way to support this whole coalition that we're building right now. Tim, another candidate who pulled out a primary win on this Super Tuesday was Mark Robinson in North Carolina. I want to point your attention to just a few of the things that we've heard from this guy. He describes COVID-19 as a globalist conspiracy theory to destroy Donald Trump. He criticized efforts to teach LGBTQ issues in sex ed, referring to transgender and homosexual people as, quote, filth. He said that people who are gay are equivalent to, quote, what the cows leave behind, as well as, quote, maggots and, quote, flies. That's just grazing the surface of what this guy has said before. I mean, I have a whole list that really, I mean,
yeah, and you didn't even get, I mean, calling the gays filth and scum and cow shit and the end of the world. That's not that good. That's pretty gross and despicable, frankly. But you didn't even get into the conspiracy side of things. I mean,
Yeah.
this guy said that the survivors of school shootings, were actors. And what did he call them? Prostitutes or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, 9/11 was an inside job. The moon landing, and he checks all the boxes. The Holocaust, he had doubts about, he had questions.
Yeah.
And
Lots
so
of
I just
lots of thoughts about Hitler. That was
yeah.
a recurring theme.
Yeah, QAnon. I mean, he touches all the crazy bases. I mean, this guy really makes Carrie Lake, I just mentioned, I kind of look like a mainstream candidate by comparison, frankly. He is just so far out there on every conspiracy, every cultural hot button issue imaginable. And North Carolina is not Alabama.
Right.
There's the Research Triangle, Raleigh, Charlotte. President Obama won there one time. Roy Cooper is a conservative Democrat, no doubt, but has won the governorship twice there. The guy that he's going to be running against, Josh Stein, the Attorney General candidate, really strong candidate. He's won twice statewide with Trump on the ballot, so he's shown some crossover appeal. So I think this is a big problem for Republicans, and frankly, to me, this is a bigger bright spot for Biden tonight than what we saw out of what was happening in the presidential primaries, just because it adds another state to the map. And I think it's still going to be a stretch state for Biden to win North Carolina, but this guy could turn off enough voters, and we saw this in Arizona. That whole Arizona election denier slate lost
Yeah.
in the midterms in a state that had elected a lot of Republicans in the past.
I mean, to that point too. I mean, if you look at 2022, there was a whole slate of like Donald Trump specific America First candidates: Don Bolduc, Carrie Lake,
Mastriano.
J.R. Majewski, Mastriano, like all of those candidates actually lost, and it was in an election where Republicans largely overperformed. I mean, that election was what was responsible for New York Republicans basically
Right.
flipping the House to their control.
Right. So I mean, I think that if this guy ends up losing a Mastriano style loss in North Carolina, boy, that makes it hard for Trump in the state, right? Like you're gonna have to win then a lot of Trump Stein voters, and I think that there'll probably be some of those out there. I know that might seem weird to some of your viewers, but I do think that I can picture my head. This is inside the right, after all. I can picture my head the Chamber of Commerce Republican type who looks at Mark Robinson and his conspiracy theories and his homophobia and it's like, this guy's gonna be bad for business in North Carolina, but I'm still gonna stick with Trump on the top of the ballot. I could
Yeah.
see 2% of the state doing that. But if this guy loses by 10, 8, 6, 5, then I think that's going to make business really tough for Donald Trump in North Carolina. So I think that this primary is very important for that reason. And I think the other reason it's very important is just across the country in these down ballot races, we are seeing this. Once again, Republican voters are putting in the most extreme, the most crazy candidate in every race. And the one that I'm obsessed with is a congressional race in Texas. It's the Dallas suburbs, exurbs really. So it's a red district, but it's still Dallas. It's not rural Texas. And they elected this guy that was the marketing director for the 2000 Mules conspiracy film, 30 years old. He's running against a mayor of a suburban town and a Hispanic woman who is the chief of staff for the congressman. So he's running against bona fide people. His only resume marker is that he was pushing this conspiracy film. He wins in a landslide. Mark Robinson wins in a landslide. It wasn't he had like 66% of the vote. And so if these Republican voters are going to keep putting up these lunatics, it's going to have. We saw the results, like you said, in 2022. That they're staring down the barrel of a replay.
And do you feel like in this election, I mean, this one, presumably, if Donald Trump doesn't win in this election, then presumably Donald Trump goes away after this. I mean, famous last words. But do you feel like
let's not presume? I want to see the stake through the heart before I do any presuming.
Yeah.
Trump Trump Kamala 2028 might be coming to a
Yeah, I mean,
YouTube
it's gonna be 2052, and it's gonna be Donald Trump is gonna be 118 years old, and we're still gonna be doing this. But do you feel like, with these extreme candidates, do you feel like at some point the fever breaks and they stop putting forward like, these Christina Karamos and J.R. Majewski's, Herschel Walker's, Dr. Oz's, Doug Mastriano's, Donald Trump's, and your people basically take back the party? Do you feel like there's any chance of like a fever breaking after this, given like now we'd be in so many election cycles in a row where it's just not working?
Yeah, I don't really see, I could see a slight fever break. I'm trying to figure out how to extend the metaphor here. Where these types of candidates, some Mark Robinsons, that eventually the party, just as a practical matter of face saving, the people like we cannot support candidates that are this extreme anymore. But I think that the fundamental change of the party to be a MAGA party, an America First, a nationalist, culture war, I just think that's here to stay. And so maybe it looks more like J.D. Vance, who isn't my cup of tea at all and is extreme in a lot of ways and gross and went along with election denial. But, he doesn't come off like a total lunatic, right?
It's just a matter of style, basically, at that point.
Yeah. And I think that where they try to find candidates that are less prone to the conspiracy, but are still advancing kind of these anti-immigrant views, isolationist views. I think that's the next step. Could my people come back eventually, like in 2052? What'd you say? Yeah, 2052, sure. But I think that the next step for the party, if they suffer defeats in 2024, would be to move back to kind of more of a bridge type. I think like a JD Vance type candidate. At least that's my opinion. But it depends, man. We got to do the work. Depends on what kind of defeat it is, right?
Yeah.
One of my Sarah Longwell, one of my colleagues at the Bulwark, was putting up a map today that she said her map today is Biden 270, Trump 268. I'm like, if that happens, well, there's going to be a lot of election conspiracy nonsense and maybe some violence. Who knows? But the party's not going to respond to that by saying, okay, we're totally going to change.
Right.
But if Biden wins a landslide, that's a different animal.
Right, which just underscores the importance of building up this coalition. So again, for those watching right now, to support, building this coalition that we are, which includes sensible Republicans, pro-democracy Republicans, independents out there, and of course the left, we have to support that whole media ecosystem as well. So for those watching, to support Tim and his work, again, please subscribe to The Bulwark. The link is right here on the screen. It's also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.